Marvel and Sony are skipping the Super Bowl entirely this year, which means no Spider-Man Brand New Day trailer and no Avengers Doomsday footage during one of the biggest advertising events in the world. The discourse online has been intense, with fans expressing frustration and confusion about why two of the most anticipated films of the year wouldn't capitalize on having over 100 million viewers watching simultaneously. But here's the reality that a lot of people aren't considering. It's not about hype or excitement or even confidence in these films. It's about basic economics and marketing strategy in an industry that's fundamentally changed how it approaches theatrical releases. The decision to skip the Super Bowl makes complete sense when you break down the actual costs, the diminishing returns of traditional advertising, and what these specific brands already have working in their favor. Let me explain why Marvel and Sony made the right call, why the Super Bowl isn't the guaranteed win it used to be, and what this tells us about how confident these studios actually are in their upcoming releases. Let's start with the most obvious factor, which is the absolutely astronomical cost of Super Bowl advertising in 2025. A standard 30-second ad spot now costs between $7 and $10 million, depending on placement and negotiation. That's not a typo. $7 to $10 million for 30 seconds of airtime. Now, obviously Disney and Sony have that kind of money available. These are multi-billion-dollar corporations with massive marketing budgets allocated for their tentpole releases. But having money and choosing to spend it wisely are two completely different things. Here's the critical detail most people overlook when they complain about no Super Bowl trailers. If you're gonna spend that kind of money on a Super Bowl spot, you're not dropping a 30-second teaser. That's a waste. You need to make an impact, which means running a full-length trailer, probably 90 seconds to 2 minutes minimum. A 2-minute Super Bowl ad would cost somewhere between $28 and $40 million based on current rates. That's an insane amount of money to spend on a single advertising placement, especially when both Spider-Man and Avengers Doomsday are brands that essentially market themselves at this point. Spider-Man is one of the most recognizable characters on the planet. The previous Spider-Man film, No Way Home, made nearly $2 billion globally. Brand New Day doesn't need a Super Bowl trailer to convince people it exists, or that it's worth watching. The title alone generates buzz. The same logic applies even more strongly to Avengers Doomsday. This is the first Avengers film since Endgame, which is the second highest grossing movie of all time. It features Robert Downey Jr. returning to the MCU as Dr. Doom after his iconic run as Iron Man ended. It's directed by the Russo brothers, who helmed the two biggest Avengers films in history. The hype is already at maximum levels without spending a single dollar on Super Bowl advertising. Marvel's entire marketing strategy for Doomsday has been built around controlled reveals, strategic leaks, and letting fan speculation do most of the heavy lifting. And it's working incredibly well. Every time new information drops about Doomsday, whether it's casting announcements, set photos, or insider reports, it dominates social media for days. That's free marketing that reaches the exact demographic Marvel needs to reach: comic book fans and general audiences who are chronically online. A Super Bowl ad reaches a broader but less targeted audience. Sure, you get 100 million viewers, but how many of those people weren't already planning to see these movies? How many casual viewers watching the game are going to be swayed by a 2-minute trailer when they weren't already interested? The conversion rate on Super Bowl ads for established franchises is probably much lower than studios want to admit. There's also the reality that Sony, Netflix, Apple, and Amazon are all skipping the Super Bowl this year, which suggests there's been a fundamental shift in how major studios and streaming platforms view this advertising opportunity. This isn't just Marvel and Sony making an isolated decision, it's an industry-wide trend away from Super Bowl spending, and that tells you something important about where the market is heading. Traditional television advertising is becoming less effective as audiences fragment across streaming platforms, social media, and on-demand content. The Super Bowl remains a massive cultural event, but its advertising dominance has diminished compared to a decade ago when it was one of the only times you could guarantee reaching such a large audience simultaneously. Now, you can release a trailer online and have it rack up 50 million views in the first 24 hours through YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and entertainment news coverage. You can target specific demographics with paid social media campaigns that cost a fraction of Super Bowl rates. You can generate organic engagement by partnering with influencers and content creators who have dedicated followings that trust their recommendations. All of that combined reaches more people more effectively and costs significantly less than a single Super Bowl spot. Let's also talk about timing and marketing cycles, because this is where strategic thinking comes into play. Avengers Doomsday releases in December 2026, so it's also over a year away. Marvel's pattern with Avengers films has always been to drop the first trailer about 6 to 8 months before release. That would put the Doomsday trailer around April or May 2026, not February 2025. Releasing it too early risks spoiling story elements that Marvel wants to keep secret, showing unfinished effects work that could generate negative reactions, and again, piquing the marketing cycle before the optimal window. Now I want to address the argument that skipping the Super Bowl is a missed opportunity, because it's not just about driving ticket sales, it's about maintaining cultural relevance and dominating the conversation. There's some validity to that perspective. The Super Bowl is one of the few remaining monoculture moments where everyone is watching the same thing simultaneously. Having your trailer debut during the game guarantees it becomes part of the national conversation the next day. Media outlets cover it extensively. Social media explodes with reactions. It creates buzz that extends beyond just comic book fans. All of that is true, but here's the counter-argument. Both Spider-Man and Avengers are already deeply embedded in popular culture. They don't need the Super Bowl to maintain relevance because they never lost it. Marvel has been dominating entertainment discourse for 15 years straight. Spider-Man is one of the most merchandised and recognized characters globally. These properties don't need to remind people they exist. They need to reveal just enough to build anticipation without oversaturating the market. And honestly, the absence of a Super Bowl trailer might be generating more conversation than a trailer would have. Look at all the articles, videos, and social media posts analyzing why Marvel and Sony skipped the game. That's free press covering a non-event. It keeps both films in the conversation without spending $40 million. It's also worth examining what studios are spending their Super Bowl budgets on instead, because the lineup reveals interesting priorities. Universal is pushing hard with Michael, the Michael Jackson biopic, which makes sense because it's targeting an older demographic that still watches traditional television. Biopics need broad awareness campaigns because they're not built on existing IP recognition. Illumination is promoting Minions 3, which is smart because that franchise's audience includes families who watch the Super Bowl together. Kids see the trailer, pester their parents, ticket sales go up. Toy Story 5 is similar. It's family-oriented content that benefits from mainstream broadcast exposure. The Super Mario Bros. Movie made over $1 billion, so Nintendo and Illumination are clearly confident that Super Bowl spending pays off for animated family films. But notice what's missing from that list. No major superhero films except for whatever DC might show at the Puppy Bowl, and even that's telling because Warner Brothers is apparently too broke to afford actual Super Bowl slots, so they're relegating Supergirl to the Puppy Bowl alternative programming. The fact that Warner Brothers, which desperately needs wins after years of DC underperformance, can't justify the Super Bowl cost tells you everything about how the economics have changed. If anyone should be spending big on Super Bowl advertising, it's Warner Brothers trying to rebuild their DC brand. But even they recognize it's not worth it. Let me also address the fan perspective here, because I understand why people are disappointed. The Super Bowl has historically been where we get our first looks at major blockbusters. It's become a tradition to gather with friends, watch the game, and freak out over the trailers during commercial breaks. Not having Spider-Man or Avengers as part of that experience feels like something's missing from the cultural ritual. I get that emotional reaction completely. But we need to separate nostalgia and tradition from practical reality. The entertainment landscape has fundamentally changed. We don't need to wait for the Super Bowl anymore to see trailers or get new information about upcoming films. Studios can drop content whenever they want and reach their target audience instantly. Marvel proved this with the Thunderbolts trailer, which dropped online with no television advertising and still generated massive engagement. The same will happen with Doomsday and Brand New Day. When those trailers eventually drop, probably online first, they'll dominate the internet for days. You'll see reaction videos, frame-by-frame breakdowns, theory crafting, all the same cultural conversation that would have happened with a Super Bowl debut, except without spending $40 million. The only difference is we're not all seeing it at the exact same moment during a specific television event. But in an era where most people watch trailers on their phones anyway, does that timing really matter? There's also a strategic element related to competition and market positioning. If Marvel and Sony both drop trailers during the Super Bowl, they'd be competing for attention not just with each other, but with every other advertiser spending millions for that airtime. Your Spider-Man trailer runs, then immediately there's a beer commercial, then a truck ad, then the game resumes. Your carefully crafted 2-minute spot gets diluted by the surrounding noise. Compare that to dropping a trailer online on a Tuesday morning when there's no other major releases competing for attention. Suddenly your trailer is the only thing entertainment media is covering. It gets featured on every major outlet. YouTubers make content about it. Twitter trends for hours. You've dominated the news cycle without any competition. That's much more valuable than being one of 40 advertisers fighting for mindshare during a 4-hour sporting event. Marvel especially has mastered this approach. They announce a trailer drop a few days in advance, building anticipation. Then they release it during off-peak times when there's minimal competition. The internet explodes. Mission accomplished. Why would they change a strategy that's proven incredibly effective just to participate in an increasingly expensive television tradition? Now let's talk about what this decision tells us about Marvel and Sony's confidence in these films, because there's been some speculation that skipping the Super Bowl indicates concern about quality or reception. I think that's completely backwards. If Marvel and Sony were worried about Doomsday or Brand New Day underperforming, they'd be spending every dollar available on marketing to maximize awareness and drive early ticket sales. The fact that they're comfortable skipping the Super Bowl suggests they believe these films will succeed based on brand recognition alone. They don't need to convince anyone that these movies exist or are worth seeing. The Marvel and Spider-Man brands are strong enough to carry themselves. That's actually a sign of confidence, not concern. Studios spend big on Super Bowl advertising when they're trying to save a film that tested poorly, or when they're launching a new IP that needs awareness. Established franchises with built-in audiences don't need that level of marketing spend. Look at the trajectory of the Fast and Furious franchise as a comparison. Those films stopped doing Super Bowl spots years ago because they realized their core audience was already locked in. They could spend less on marketing and still hit their box office targets. Marvel and Sony are applying the same logic here. Why spend $40 million on a Super Bowl trailer when you could allocate that money to international marketing, social media campaigns, or save it entirely and let the film's natural buzz do the work? I also think there's an element of Marvel wanting to maintain control over their narrative and reveals. Super Bowl trailers become events that the studio doesn't fully control. Once that footage airs during the game, it's out there. Frame-by-frame analysis begins immediately. Every detail gets scrutinized. Spoilers spread rapidly. For a film like Avengers Doomsday, which is apparently packed with surprises, cameos, and major plot revelations, Marvel might be reluctant to show anything substantial this far in advance. They've been incredibly careful about what information gets released, using strategic leaks and controlled announcements to build hype without spoiling key moments. A Super Bowl trailer would require showing enough footage to justify the cost, which means revealing more than Marvel probably wants to at this stage. It's better to wait until closer to release when they can craft a trailer that generates excitement without giving away the store. And remember, Marvel has multiple Doomsday trailers planned. The first one will probably be a teaser that establishes tone and key players without revealing major plot points. Subsequent trailers will show more as release approaches. None of those need to be Super Bowl slots because Marvel's built-in audience will find them regardless of where they debut. Let me also address the Spider-Man specific situation because there's an interesting wrinkle there. Brand New Day doesn't have a confirmed release date or even an official title yet. Everything we're hearing is based on leaks and insider reports. Sony might not be ready to launch a full marketing campaign because the film is still in production and they haven't finalized their strategy. Dropping a Super Bowl trailer for a film that might not come out for 18 months, with effects that aren't finished and story elements that could still change, would be premature and potentially damaging. It's much safer to wait until the film is further along in post-production, the release date is locked, and they can present a polished product that accurately represents what audiences will see in theaters. Sony's also in an interesting position because they're partnering with Marvel on this film, which means coordinating marketing strategies between two massive studios with different priorities and approaches. That coordination takes time and might explain why we haven't seen any Brand New Day footage yet, despite production being well underway. It's not necessarily a red flag or cause for concern. It's just the reality of complex partnerships in modern blockbuster filmmaking. Looking at the bigger picture, I think the absence of Marvel and Sony from the Super Bowl signals a broader industry shift toward digital-first marketing strategies. The pandemic accelerated this trend by forcing studios to find new ways to reach audiences when traditional advertising channels were disrupted. What they discovered is that digital marketing is not only cheaper, but often more effective at reaching and engaging target demographics. You can run targeted ads on YouTube that only show to people who've watched superhero content. You can create Instagram campaigns that reach comic book fans specifically. You can partner with TikTok creators who have millions of followers in your exact demographic. All of that is measurable, adjustable in real time, and costs a fraction of broadcast television advertising. The Super Bowl still has value for certain products and demographics, but for superhero blockbusters targeting a digitally native audience, it's becoming less essential. Marvel and Sony are adapting to this new reality, and other studios will follow. In 5 years, the Super Bowl might not have any major film trailers at all, with everything moving to strategic online drops and social media campaigns. That's not a decline in movie marketing, it's an evolution toward more efficient and effective strategies. So where does all this leave us as fans waiting for our first look at Spider-Man Brand New Day and Avengers Doomsday? Honestly, we're probably gonna get those trailers sooner than people think, just not during the Super Bowl. Marvel traditionally drops first looks at D23 or San Diego Comic-Con for their biggest films. Brand New Day could get a teaser as early as this summer at Comic-Con, especially if Sony wants to build momentum heading into 2026. Doomsday will almost certainly get its first trailer revealed reveal at either D23 in August or during Comic-Con, giving fans the same kind of exclusive first-look experience that generates massive buzz and media coverage. Those venues are actually better for Marvel's purposes, because the audience is exclusively fans who are already invested and will amplify the marketing through their own channels. A Super Bowl spot reaches casual viewers who might not care. A Comic-Con reveal reaches hardcore fans who will spend the next 6 months analyzing every frame and keeping the conversation alive. That's more valuable long-term than a single Super Bowl moment. So yeah, I'm disappointed we're not getting Doomsday footage during the big game, but I'm not worried about it. Both films will be massive regardless of when we see the first trailers. And honestly, the anticipation created by waiting might actually work in Marvel and Sony's favor. Every day without a trailer is another day of fans speculating, theorizing, and keeping these films in the cultural conversation. That's marketing you can't buy, no matter how much a Super Bowl slot costs.